who's going to take care of the boys is what I heard my mom say when I would tell her that I was going out with friends. As a mother, that saying would haunt me every time I wanted to do something for myself. Was I being selfish? I never actually wanted to have children in the first place, and now I found myself caring for a nonverbal child with autism who requires more of me than I would ever have imagined. These are the words of Nellie Escalante in her book, on the back of her book, Peekaboo, I See Me. And I'm delighted to welcome her as a guest on this YouTube channel today. My name is Veronica Hunter of ADHD What Now? And I help parents to know the broad range of choices available for them when their child has ADHD so they can select what their unique family needs to grow in health and happiness. Now, Nellie, I was so impressed by her and her addressing this question of what happens when you lose yourself in all that is required to care for complex children or children with special needs, neurodiverse children, all these different ideas around children that just need extra support in some way, shape, or form. And it takes so much from the parents that you can lose who you are. So enjoy the conversation today about what to do when that happens, or you find yourself feeling that way.
Well, really, I just wanted to have this conversation with her today and just share a bunch of her beautiful thoughts on that subject. She is an artist in and of herself, and she works with some very well-known art museums and for some amazing programs as public service for people. She's a beautiful soul. So thank you for being here, Nellie, and sharing your story and your thoughts on this subject and just boosting people up in this space because we need it so much.
Thank you so much, Veronica. I'm super happy to be here too. So excited to, thank you so much for the invitation.
Your book you chose to write, Peekaboo, I See Me. Can you share why? Like, writing a book is no small task and figuring out how to do it. So what message did you really want to share?
So this is actually my second book. I wrote, my first book is more about my journey as a special needs mom and being a creative entrepreneur. And while I was actually writing this book while before that book. And this book is, puts me in a very kind of vulnerable position. I just wasn't ready to write it, but I actually was writing it for 10 years. It's composed of my, a lot of my journal entries while I was parenting two kids on the spectrum. And honestly, I wrote it because there was nothing like it out there. A lot of the books out there were more about how to help your child. And I had all those books. But I think it's Austin Kleon who says you need to write the book that you need. And this is the book that I wish I had and the book that I needed. And I think self-care is a buzzword now, but it really wasn't 10 years ago. And I really needed it. I really needed, someone to tell me like, hey, it's okay to take a break. It's okay. Your dreams are still valid and important. I needed someone to tell me that. And I just felt like, well, then maybe I need to tell someone else that. And so the main reason why I wrote the book.
So then what is your story, like the background, just share your story around parenting your special needs child and your experience there.
Yeah, so I have two kids on the autism spectrum. They are very different. My older child just graduated from high school. He's going to college. So he's definitely on one side of the spectrum. And my son, Daniel, is nonverbal. He is very sensory needy, very hyper, although he's getting much better. Lovable, very affectionate, and just a beautiful soul to be around. So I am also, like you said, I'm an artist. I am a museum educator / art historian. And I needed to take 7 years off from all of that wonderful work to take care of my kids, which now I deem like wonderful work as well. But it's very hard work. And that was very hard for me because it was never my plan to be a stay-at-home mom. My plan, even before I had kids, I always felt like I would be a working mom because I like to work, and it gives me a sense of identity. And I felt like I can do both. But not with two kids on the spectrum. I realized really soon, and my husband as well, that I needed to dedicate my time to parenting, especially my younger child. And with all the therapies and all everything that comes along with parenting a child on the autism spectrum, I needed to stay home. So I kind of switched gears and left my art history museum job to become an artist and have more of a flexible way of making money through Etsy and doing online, um, having online shops and just kind of doing crafts fair, which is a lot more flexible. So I'm back to museum work. But yeah, those 7 years were really tough, and that's really the crux of the book. I started journaling just to cope and just to get my feelings out, and to work things out within myself. Writing has always been a coping mechanism for me, even when I was a child. And so I went back to journaling, and that's what really, never really with the intent of, at the beginning, of writing a book. It was really just to get my feelings out. But then I thought, like, if I feel this way, other moms feel this way as well. So that's what, I decided to write the book based on my journal entries.
Mm-hmm. So you had two chapters inside of that book, right? One is remember who you are, and the other one is forget who you are, right? So those
Yeah.
are almost competing ideas. And is that a lot of what was going on for you because you had to give up so much of what you had initially envisioned for yourself, when life came and switched, and parenting is just like the story. I feel like for a large part of the story is it's not at all what you expected. Something is different, and if you're anything like me, it's way more work than you ever had expected it to be.
Yeah.
So it can feel so challenging and lonely. So yeah, what's going on with those two competing ideas?
So yeah, it is interesting. When I wrote those two chapters, I'm like, I just told them to remember themselves, and I'm telling them to forget themselves in the next chapter. And I was very much aware of that. But I think what I was trying to say is, there are things that are within one, right, that are innate, like the gifts that God gave you, who you are as a person, the way you interact with people, that are just who you are, whether you're a parent or not. And so I wanted to really say that, having a special needs child does not mean that you give up those things that bring you joy, that might not be parent related. I remember in that chapter, I wrote about how I started reading Sting's biography. I mean, I loved Sting as a high school student, as a college student. And when I heard that his biography came out, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get it. And it just brought me back to who I was pre-kids, and I feel like you said, you tend to lose yourself in the care that can be so overwhelming. And I just went back to other things that brought me joy, like sewing. And so that was that first chapter. Remember who you were. You're still that person, and you still remember those dreams that you had. You still can dream, and it doesn't have to be have to do with your child. You can still have your own personal dreams. And I guess the next chapter, forgetting who you were, because there is some adjustment that has to happen. With that was like, I talked a lot in that chapter about amassing just like this large collection of art history books. I worked in a museum. And so I had a lot of art history museum books, catalogs that my child was destroying, and kind of in his own nonverbal way was like, well, now I'm here, and you can't have all this stuff. And I lived in a smaller apartment. My husband had hobbies too. I had, my older child had hobbies. I had stuff for Daniel, for my younger child, sensory needy stuff. And it was becoming overwhelming and crowded. and, you know, kind of bordering on hoarding. So I had to forget for that moment. And when I wrote that chapter, that was very much in the moment where I had to realize, you know, I had to really concentrate on Daniel. And it wasn't like I was forgetting who I was. I needed to get rid of stuff that, you know, was holding me back. And doesn't mean I'm not a museum educator anymore, or I'm not an art historian, or that I don't love art anymore, but I just had to get rid of the stuff to make room for this new life that I was having, which was like, you know, I was embarking on a new identity as an online artist, you know, selling my stuff online, creating. And so that was kind of a new identity. And I had a lot of, you know, fabric and art supplies and things of that nature that was taking up space. And so the art history books had to go. Now, like, you know, after, it's interesting, I went back to my museum career and I'm just developing that collection again. And I don't regret doing it. That was something I had to do at that moment. And, you know, it's just really a testament that you do have to adjust, and you do have to change, and you do have to pivot, because your life is different. But you can choose what you know, what you get rid of, and hold on to those things that still make you you. You know, I held on to my slide projector, and I still gave my older son little art talks, because that was still who I was. You know, I loved talking about art, so I did hold on to that. I held on to some prized art history books, so I didn't totally give up that part of me, but I had to make room, and make space
Mhm.
for this new identity and this new life.
So if you could go back to either yourself or pretend you're talking to someone who is right now where you were and is feeling lost, perhaps in who they are as a parent, what would you say to them?
I think I would say to them what I wish people would say to me, that my journey with my special needs child is my journey. You know, we often say, like, you meet one child with autism and you met one child with autism. You know, I think at the beginning I was kind of gauging my life. You know, you go to a lot of support groups, and so you're surrounded by other special needs moms, and they tell you what they're doing for their child, and you know, you feel compelled, like, to try every little thing that other parents are doing, in hopes that it will work for your child. And you see moms that, you know, are just, I just felt like other moms were just like sacrificing, and I needed to follow suit. Um, and I needed to sacrifice in different ways. You know, we all sacrifice in our own ways and not in the same way. And I would tell them, you know, to seek God in your life for your own journey, you know, in this special needs motherhood journey. And it's different for everybody. I honestly, I never felt pulled to like march for, like, do the autism walks or any of that. I had a child who was kind of at that point out of control. I couldn't control him. And the thought of like giving up a weekend to do that was not part of self-care. But I felt guilty about it for a long time. And I felt guilty about a lot of things that I didn't do, that I saw other special needs moms doing. But then I was doing stuff that, you know, that was also sacrificing, you know, and maybe not as seen. And so I would just say that, like, just your journey with your special needs child is your journey. And that doesn't mean that it's different or that it's less than other moms who are doing the same work.
Mhm. If you could select one tip for self-care, what would it be?
Just one? I have 35 of them in my book. Okay.
I know.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I think for me, the best tip I can give is to really look inward. You know, we think about self-care as, you know, bubble baths and getting a break and having time for yourself. What I like most about my book, it's that it's a progression. I think at the beginning chapters was all about, like, you know, like, hey, this is what happens when you have special needs children, and giving people an insight to what life is like. But then as the book goes on, you know, I love kind of like the last two chapters, because it's really, you know, about really, you know, what is this journey showing me about myself? um and I talk about like the chapter 34 is more about just my journey with Daniel, my younger son. And we had a couple of tries with medication with him that didn't work, that actually made him aggressive. And I'm definitely you know, just saying before this that it's not like we're never going to try medication, and that if, again, if you want to try medication, it's totally okay. It didn't work for us, and it made him aggressive. And one particular incident, you know, we went to like our favorite pizza place called Pepe's Pizza, and he was on medication and just acted horribly, just, you know, hitting other customers, trying to steal their food. He was just not, you know, not in a good place that day, and we probably shouldn't have taken him out. um but he, you know, it, and then when we were thinking, you know, we had a bad time there, and then like a month later my husband's like, you know, let's go back to Pepe's Pizza. And I was like, oh my god, like I felt so embarrassed. I would never go back to, I'm never going to go back to Pepe's Pizza. Like we I'm swearing that place off. And he was like, why? Like they probably forgot. And you know, we went back, and I was like, oh my god, like no one remembered, no one cared, and if they did, like they didn't say anything. But it really, it made me realize where that shame was coming from. And it was, you know, I had a lot of incidences like that with my dad, who was an alcoholic, you know, a lot of scenes with him in restaurants. And so, you know, just got, it clicked to me, like a lot of some, that feeling of feeling out of control was things that I haven't really dealt with, you know. And going forward, like I realized there are a lot of feelings that I had with my son that were unresolved feelings that I had with my father. And so, you know, I, that prompted me to go to therapy. And it was something that was really not on my mind. And so that's self-care, you know, thinking about your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being. Um, I find myself now being kind of less frazzled by what people say, and by incidences that happen with Daniel, because I, you know, I know what triggers them. I know where they're coming from. I'm in a, not that I don't get upset, but I mean I'm in a different place than I was when I started my journey with my kids. Um, because I've dealt with a lot of stuff, you know, that's just about me and my upbringing. So that's one, I guess, if I were to think about self-care, that would be one tip. Just take care of your emotional well-being and your spiritual life, and that will help you be a better mom, I think.
That is so beautiful. I was going to ask you to share a bit about, from your perspective of now, looking back, like what has changed. But did you just essentially cover that?
Yeah, I think that that's the main thing that has changed. You know, my, you know, I think, you know, and when you think about self-care, it's very much kind of like about yourself. And what has also changed is that, you know, when Daniel acts up, or, you know, things happen, like, what is he trying to tell me? You know, and it's, we think about kids with autism, you know, and we see the autism first. And sometimes it has nothing to do with autism. You know, he's trying to tell me something and he's frustrated because he can't tell me. And it has given me, you know, besides a sense of self-awareness about my own stuff, it has also helped me to calm down and slow down, because I think I've been taking care of myself emotionally, that I can then be like more in tune with him. Like, okay, what's going on with you? Like, what are you trying to tell me, Daniel? And I can slow down and really pay attention with him, to him, and not attribute every little thing to autism. You know, he's a person first. And so I had to really, you know, that my going to therapy and really thinking, you know, really paying attention to that really made me realize that he's a person first, and he has stuff that he probably wants to share with me that he gets frustrated or can't, and we have to find different ways to help him to do that.
Mhm.
So
So a lot of people in this audience have children with ADHD, and sometimes ADHD and autism can go together, right? And
yeah.
I feel as if there's some overlap in terms of what you were saying also in the idea of they're a person first, right? And that as
Yeah.
you go along and you can understand and begin to understand the reason behind some of the actions that just like didn't make sense to you at first, like that can make such a big difference. And so that resonated with me,
Yeah.
along with the idea that you were just sharing about it's our inner journey, right? Like that's such a huge part of the picture for just life. And when something is perhaps unexpected or different than you expected and you feel like you've lost yourself, is that if it really is the inner journey that makes
Yeah.
a big difference. And so I love how you have helped with that, even through what you've said here and through what you shared inside of your book. And where can people find you online if they'd like to interact with you more?
Yeah, sure. So I'm definitely on Instagram as Nelarte, Nelarte. Also on Facebook with the same name and my first and last name, Nellie Escalante. And I'm hopefully getting a new website soon. So I am working on it. So that will be nelarte.com very soon. And so hopefully you'll be able to see everything that I do just right there encapsulated on the website. But yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today, Nellie.
You're welcome. Thank you, Veronica, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And keep in touch. Bye.
Yes. Bye-bye.
I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Nellie. And whether you've just found out that your child has ADHD, or perhaps you've been on this journey for a while, but you're just not getting the answers that you need, and you're asking, what now? Then start here. Start with this YouTube channel and dive in and find some deep-rooted answers and solutions for what you need. Or consider joining us in our all-in-one ADHD community, where we go through a simple 5-step process for a whole family approach when your child has ADHD. I'd love to see you in there because I'm so delighted in seeing the growth that's happening for all of us who are participating there. And I hope that you've gotten what you need about this question here today and continue to grow, for today is a good day to grow in health and happiness for your family.